If we start in red and actually start with the Lions, it's interesting, even looking through some of the back pages this morning, the feeling of negativity after this tour is sort of existential, that there is this sort of sense that the Lions tour let the game of rugby down, that as a spectacle it was so poor, and as a nation of sports people, South Africa were so mean, and their time wasting and their antics throughout the tour have brought shame on the game of rugby union, which kind of spells to me a little bit of sour grapes, to be quite honest with you. Like, I get the feeling of distaste when your team loses, and like I guess we were all relatively rooting for the Lions. But if we step back from this for a moment, do we not just think that the Lions got outsmarted and outmuscled, and in the dark alley that is a Lions tour, South Africa were just better?
Is that what you think?
Kind of, to be honest. Like,
that at the end of a sporting contest, the best team wins, and that we should shake hands and get on with it and forget about it? Is that really what you think?
I think in the context of this, kind of think South Africa were the better team. Like, there was a lot of sideshows going on, obviously, in the build-up to the second test in particular, but let's not allow that to colour our view to the point where we think that the Lions were actually better.
Is it just a sideshow where straight red card offences become yellows or not even penalties because the referees have been terrorised and terrified by what's going to happen and the scrutiny they've been put under? I think that what happened was a fundamental shift in how teams must manage refereeing from now on. When Erasmus comes out and says, do you remember that video you made where you found the scene where they were giving out to, was it the centre or the back row, for not doing a full, was he trying to mimic Owen Farrell's tackle technique, where it was essentially like he was a human torpedo, and they were like, oh yeah, that's what you have to do. What you have to do now is what the rules are as we've been shown them, not what the rules are as what they're written down. And so what Rassie has now done is exactly the same thing. He has changed the game where every head coach should come out and in minute detail analyse every single fault that the opposition has had and criticise and blame the referee, but say, oh, I'm not actually blaming you here. I'm not blaming you. I'm just going on what you did last week. Rassie's opened a can of worms here, and it has completely changed the game. And I think if you don't do this now as an international manager, then you're not doing your job properly, because he changed the rules and World Rugby allowed him to change the rules. And this is not sour grapes in any way whatsoever. I'm on the record here saying I think that South African rugby culture is a fairly bankrupt thing where you have teenagers doping to try and get contracts. It's in my view one of the worst sporting cultures on the planet. And I think that what we saw over the course of the tests was the manifestation of that from South Africa. So if you're saying at the end of this we should shake hands and go, that's grand, the best team won, the best team definitely won. I make no bones about that. They in that first game that the Lions won, the refereeing decisions were bad, and the South Africans should have won that game and would have won that game if the referee had done what he was supposed to do. In the second test, if the referee had done what he was supposed to do, the Lions would have won that game. Colby would have got a red card and wouldn't have been on the field to win the game in the third one. And the third test could have been a very different one. It would have been very interesting to see what happens. And I don't really care about the outcome, who wins, who loses, whatever. But ultimately, in the long term, if we don't see Andy Farrell giving it to the referees in advance of games and releasing these type of videos, then is he doing his job? I don't know. I mean, what like, sorry, they're the rules of engagement, and that's what Rassie wants, because that's what Rassie said. Oh, you know, the other thing is that, like, they're supposed to be this big macho, we are the men culture, when actually all they are whining babies. That was the most babyish, the rules didn't. And the other one was like, there was a Bismarck Duplessis tackle on Dan Carter from 10 years ago. They're still bitching about. That's worse than us and Thierry Henry. If there is a conspiracy against South Africa and South African rugby from the referees, it is literally the worst conspiracy in the history of humanity, because they've won 3 World Cups. It's a shitty conspiracy that has completely failed to deliver on what it's supposed to do, which is preventing South African rugby from revealing its true self. And yet I think South African rugby managed to reveal its true self. So I don't think that we should just forgive and forget, because this changed the game. That's it. It's over. You've got to go after the referees. You've got to attack the referees, because that's what the best team in the world who've just won the World Cup, that's what they do, and they set the rules.
The counterpoint to that is that the conditions were there for Razzie Erasmus to do something like this, for any coach to do something like this. It's no coincidence that Sky Sports went into this Lions tour with Nigel Owens as co-commentator. Nigel Owens didn't come on as co-commentator as a result of Razzie Erasmus making those comments. Before this tour, the conditions existed in rugby union for the referee to be as important as any player on the pitch. That is the way we view this game. Every single TMO decision was already being scrutinised. There was already a lot of sour grapes after every Six Nations game, after every big Champions Cup game that we would watch. The refereeing is part of the conversation now in a much bigger way than it's ever been in the past in rugby union. And that is what leads to an extraordinary moment, which was the build-up to the second test. So I don't think Razzie Erasmus has caused this on his own. I think it's definitely been the most brazen attempt at trying to win over a referee and influence a referee. But I don't think it exists in isolation. I think that there were years and years and years of an attitude towards referee which was full of disdain in rugby, which has led us to this moment. Like, I mean, there was a urinal in New Zealand with Wayne Barnes's head etched into it after the 2007 World Cup. Like, this is the sort of level of notoriety that referees have had in the recent history of rugby, and this was just a further step forward. So, like,
it's been incompetence up to this point. What South Africa were alleging was that this was somehow the rest of the world against them. Where you know, what gave them that idea? You know, where did they suddenly get the notion that the rest of the world was against them? Maybe because the rest of the world was against them for a long period of time for, you know, historically important reasons. I think that's not actually a counterpoint. I think that explains stuff, and I think fair enough. I think that we're probably making the same point here, that like the game has reached a point now where it's really screwed. You would be very worried about the future of rugby. I do not expect Andy Farrell, for clarity's sake, I do not expect Andy Farrell to go and do an hour-long pre-match video every time pointing out how Kyle Sinclair is scrummaging wrong and how the number 8 isn't actually bound properly at the scrum. That would be boring and crap. And the game was crap. The second game was one of the worst games of rugby of all time to watch. Like, it lacked all form of entertainment because of what Razzie did. And I'm being completely facetious when I say that you should do that, because you shouldn't do this. And World Rugby needs to throw the book at them, but they won't. They won't throw the book at him.
But your job as a head coach, as a director of rugby, is to create a siege mentality at times. And South Africa have absolutely lived off that. What you mentioned there about the school kids doping, they have used that as part of that mentality, as part of all the world thinks we're cheats.
Rotten.
But they use that as motivation, and they've used it very well. And that is your job as a head coach and as a director of rugby. Like, I'm still
Razzie did a great job. Razzie, I think, I make them absolute favourites to win the World Cup. And I said this on Twitter the other night. When they win the World Cup, all those mediocre books that they use to cash in the aftermath of winning that World Cup are all going to point to Razzie's video and go, yeah, he said what we were all thinking. Yeah. And it rallies the team and it brings them all together. But I just think, from a rugby's perspective, that it is absolutely rotten and it's very damaging.
Okay, you may be right. You may be right in that. I do think, though, that this has been amplified by people within the Lions setup. Even Gregor Townsend being like, I don't think this is a good look for the game. And I know he was talking about time wasting and all that. And he's a great rugby man who I assume wants to uphold the traditions that rugby union talks about all the time. And maybe he feels that they were slipping, and I'm sure what he's speaking about is a genuine idea, and he genuinely feels that it's not a good look for the game. But I just find it interesting that this is the tone coming from the Lions side of things, the predominant tone coming from the Lions side of things in the aftermath of a series defeat, when the Lions were really bad for a lot of the series, and a lot of the questions should be asked about why the Lions were so bad.
Yeah, Finn Russell was pretty good. Finn Russell changed the game immediately. It was like, we could look like this? Robbie Hedgehog can get the ball in a bit of space. Wow. Okay. Look, we'll move on, because we're going to do Matt Williams in this a little bit later on. But you're right. The Lions should absolutely be in the red, but South African rugby culture, not interested.
Morning Stain strikes again, it says on screen. Oh my God. Like, you were talking about predictions. Neil Tracy the other day did say that he was going to come on and score in the 79th minute, and I think he actually got it bang on.